Hello everyone, Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching. I have another Monday quarterback video for you. I'm going to play this video and talk about things that are going on to better explain what's going on and talk about things that I think that are being done right and or done wrong. So this video does not follow a typical critical incident briefing type of video. This video is not even published by an agency. In fact, this video is being published by a news entity out of Michigan. The news entity basically got this footage via an open records request, and they published it in March of 2023. The incident itself occurred in December of 2021. Here is a news article from M Live that was updated December 22nd, 2021. Burton, Michigan. A police officer and a Genesee County Sheriff's deputy are expected to be okay after suffering wounds during a shooting Tuesday afternoon in Burton that left a male suspect dead. Genesee County Sheriff's Deputy Brandon Fatching underwent emergency trauma surgery for 3 hours at Hurley Medical Center in Flint and is now expected to survive, but remains in critical condition. Burton police officer Dalton Christie was moved from critical to fair condition. The shooting took place around 2 p.m. Tuesday, December 21st, after police responded to a report of a man with a gun in Burton near Columbine and Bristol roads. The suspect was identified and fled on foot. The officer and deputy pursued the suspect in a foot chase, and he attempted to climb a fence, which collapsed. Police were attempting to pull the fence off the suspect when he opened fire. The officer and deputy returned fire, and the suspect was shot multiple times. Swanson was asked to clarify these details at an 11 p.m. news conference, but he said the investigation is still taking place, so exact details of the shooting incident were not available. The suspect, a Burton man in his 20s, was pronounced deceased at the scene. Swanson said officers attempted to render aid on the suspect at the scene. The shooting incident, from start to finish, lasted approximately 10 minutes. Swanson thanked the response team from the officers, blah, blah, blah. The Burton mayor said that the last time a police officer was shot in Burton was nearly 30 years ago. And that's about it for this news article. All right, so let's get into the video.
You want to start P9 that way?
You want to start checking?
Copy that. Open door directly behind the address. About to check it.
Okay, so they are on this call where a guy has been reported with a gun. Now, the circumstances involving this call, I don't know. I would suspect that what's going on is just something more than a person observed to be in possession of a gun. Because here in America, just possessing a gun is not illegal. We have the Second Amendment. So I don't think it's a case of this person was walking around with a rifle slung on their back, or someone noticed he had a holstered handgun. It seems to me that probably something more was going on that caught people's attention and is now why the police are out looking for him. It could have been that the guy was walking around with a gun in his hand. He was waving it around, acting erratically, something to draw the attention of the police. Like I said, just merely being in possession of a gun in and of itself is just not illegal unless you're a prohibited person like a felon. So this gun call that they're on, it is a high risk type of call. It has the potential to turn into a gunfight. Now, all incidents, all calls, there is that possibility, right? But some are labeled as, low risk and others are high risk. This here is something that is high risk. So the officer whose camera that we're looking through, he has got a rifle. And that is the right tool to get for a high-risk call. If you know you're going to a gunfight, bring a rifle. And bring your friends with rifles. Rifles will dominate gunfights. They'll stop them a lot faster. Rifles are more accurate, and their terminal ballistics are way better than that of a pistol. This ends up being one of my chief complaints when it comes to videos like this, officers neglecting to get rifles out. I think that is a huge problem in this nation. I think that's a sign of some deficiencies in realistic training as far as the deployment of a rifle, and I think it's just a sign of improper training and instilling a true fighting mindset in people's minds. And the fact that just some people don't have a fighting mindset, and so that kind of goes back into some faults with hiring practices. But overall, I think it's a training issue. Unrealistic training when it comes to rifles, and just not good enough training to further develop a good fighting mindset. As I said, rifles are better than pistols. They are more accurate, and the terminal ballistics are way better. You have more points of contact on a rifle to help stabilize it and reduce as much movement in that gun as possible. The least amount of movement means the more accurate you're going to be. With a pistol, you don't have that many points of contact on the pistol. You just got your two hands. That's it. You can't shoulder it or anything like that. And the ballistics suck on it. So good on this officer for getting his rifle out. He recognized that this is a call that is high risk. They're going to be dealing with a person who they know to have a gun. So he's bringing the right tool to the job. The deputy here, on the other hand, I think has failed with selecting the proper tool. Now, is it possible that he doesn't have a rifle? Yes, that's possible. I kind of doubt it, considering that this city officer has a rifle, but yet a sheriff deputy doesn't. If one of the two was not going to be issued a rifle, I would have expected a city officer not to be issued one. A sheriff deputy having such a broader service area going out to very remote areas, I would expect that agency to have rifles for sure. But there are some agencies out there that just don't issue rifles out for whatever stupid reasons they have. If an agency doesn't have rifles available to its officers, then that is a sign of bad leadership at the top. If your chief law enforcement officer can't move things around in the budget, can't politic enough to get their personnel equipped with rifles, then you don't have a good leader in there. You don't have someone in there who's really truly looking out for the best interest of the officers. You just have someone in that position who's out for themselves. Plain and simple. So I think it's most likely this deputy has a rifle in his car. He's just neglected to get it. And as I said, I think that overall these kind of issues are training issues. I don't think that there's realistic training being done with the rifles, and I just don't think that there's good enough training to properly instill that type of fighting mindset where a person is instinctively going to say, hey, we need a rifle for this. Another thing that I'm just not a big fan of, off this image right here is the way he is standing in that door for a long period of time and looking around. Call this a fatal funnel right here, standing in doorways. It's not the best place to be at the onset of a gunfight. All right, moving on.
Watch it. Double punch real quick.
I'll back that up real quick. So they're going down this little small opening between the fence and the building.
Watch it. Double.
Top of this fence over here, you can see that sheriff deputy scaling the fence, about to go over.
Punch real quick.
Boom, that's him right there.
I couldn't copy that traffic. Copy that. Suspect running northbound. Shots fired.
I got him! He's hit! Get the fuck down!
4-7. 57. 44-7.
Get back! Oh, shoot your hands!
119, send it to my computer. All units now on scene, stay off of traffic.
I'm going to you, Christy.
46 for shit.
I got it.
Northbound from 2133. East Bristol.
Where you at? Where you at?
My legs!
Okay.
My legs and my right ankle.
1813 for status.
Sir, get back!
Get back! Get in the house!
Where you at?
Open my...
Where at?
Right here.
Hey, step in.
Right here, right.
Step in.
1811 for a status.
Turn up and shot.
Copy that. 1810, where's your location?
11, I'm with him. Tourniquets on him.
1811, are you in the backyard at 2133?
Yes, I know the suspect. He's underneath the fence. You good?
Can somebody verify the location of the officer shot?
What's the address here? Are you hit?
What is the location of the officer?
Watch fire. You hit?
Yeah.
Alright, get down.
Place. In the leg and chest.
1810, are you...
Wait, no, tourniquet right here! Don't fucking move! Don't fucking move!
Copy that.
Don't fucking move!
Got it.
Hey, hang him!
Got it?
Hang him!
Where you hit?
City Barnes, north of Connell, turn right on Connell, eastbound on Connell.
Address, he's hit hard!
I got it. Open it.
You got it?
Dalton's hit. This paramedic is hit.
Oh shit.
You with me, buddy? You with me? Just keep breathing. Just keep fucking breathing.
Come across.
Get him in my fucking car. Let's go. Can I sit up?
Alright, come on! Grab a leg.
Let's go. Roll it.
Just keep hanging on, bro.
You right here?
Yep, right there. Get him!
You're going to be taking Saginaw North or 475 North?
All right, brother.
D unit.
We're going to be northbound Saginaw.
Christy, I'm back.
Yeah, you're good, my man. You're good.
What do you need, Corey? I got gauze.
Copy that. Saginaw to Hemphill.
We're gonna take out this whole boot.
Still with us. Copy that. Semi-responsive.
You all right, brother?
Where's the second rig going? 2141 Bristol.
So I think we can go ahead and take us to try to get.
If there's not a game on you down Connell Street, set them up at Connell.
I think one of my bullets hit Christie.
Yeah,
I think my bullet hit Christie.
you fired at him?
Was that guy in there's moving on the other side of the fence? He's right there. He backs up.
Don't stop talking. Let's say we go. Oh, walk into a car. Walk by. I don't know yet. The medic?
Yeah, good. Just shook him up, obviously. Blur.
Forward 5th and second off through it.
Yeah.
You know who hit him?
I don't think I hit the suspect. I think one of my bullets hit Christie. Because I saw the mag and he shot, and he backs up and he points, and then I just saw a blur behind the fence, which I thought was the suspect, and I fired around that fence, and I think one of mine hit Christie in the leg.
Car 2, I got northbound 475 shut down.
All right. So there's a lot to go into on this video here. So the layout is a little difficult to fully get and understand. We don't get to see an aerial of the scene. We don't get to see any breakdown of the scene or anything like that. So this is the fence that the suspect, I guess, was trying to go over, and it just fell apart on him. And this is from the area that the officer came from. He came around from the other back side of the building. Now, when we go to where he's over here with the officer who's been shot in the legs, so looking back, you can see the deputy over there. Let's see if I can get the frame just right.
What's the address here?
All right, so it's kind of blurry in this freeze frame right here, but you can see the down fence. You can see just a little bit of a sliver of an opening right here. So, and you can't see from this officer's perspective when he's over here because his camera is covered up by his arm and the rifle so much that it's just, there's not much to see. So it's hard to say what exactly he could fully see. And he talks there towards the end, about what he thought he saw, and he fired. And where this Christie officer was exactly, I don't know. He could have been a lot closer over here, and then as he started taking rounds and gunshots were coming, he took off running and ended up over there behind that vehicle. That's possible. Or he could have been further over there by that vehicle, and that's where he ended up getting shot at. That part's not exactly clear either. So, don't know where the Christie officer was when he got hit. And we don't know for sure, how much of this officer could see through this sliver of an area right here. This goes back to knowing your target and what is behind it. Let's go towards the end where he's kind of talking about his version of events.
I think one of my bullets hit Christie. I think my bullet hit Christie.
You fired at him?
Was that guy in there's moving on the other side of the fence? He's right there. He backs up.
Don't stop talking.
That guy in there's. I think my bullet hit Christie.
You fired at him?
Was that guy in there's moving on the other side of the fence? He's right there. He backs up.
Don't stop talking. Let's say we go. Oh, walk into a car. Walk by. I don't know.
Forward 5th and
The medic?
Yeah, good. Just shook him up, obviously. Blur.
Forward 5th and second off through it.
Yeah.
You know who hit him?
I don't think I hit the suspect. I think one of my bullets hit Christie. Because I saw the magnet, he point, shot, and he backs up and he points, and then I just saw a blur behind the fence, which I thought was the suspect, and I fired around that fence, and I think one of mine hit Christy in the leg. I thought it was the suspect, shot, and he backs up and he points, and then I just saw, because I saw the magnet, he point, shot, and he backs up and he points, and then I just saw a blur behind the fence, which I thought was the suspect, and I fired around that fence, and I think one of mine hit Christy in the leg.
Okay. Excuse me. Know your target and what is beyond it. It sounds like to me this officer was not fully sure about what the hell he was shooting at. He seemed like he was believing or assuming that what he was shooting at was the bad guy. And it could have been that the movement that he was seeing was the other officer. And he fired and was aiming at what he thought was a suspect, but was actually the officer, and ended up hitting the officer, or he was firing at what he thought was the suspect and missed, and rounds went and hit the officer. So don't know for sure what was going on there, but this brings in the topic of know your target and what is beyond it. Positive identification. So there are only a small number of instances in which I would think it would be acceptable to shoot at a target that you can't fully see. One example would be you're at home, inside your house, and there's a person on the other side of the door beating on that door, saying that they're going to come in and do bad things to you. And you've got your gun, and they're beating on that door, trying to get through it. And they've busted out the window that's on the door, and they're reaching in, and they're unlocking your door, ready to come inside your house. In that kind of scenario, where you technically can't fully see your target, I would think that would be an acceptable time to shoot at a target. When a threat is behind a wall, you're able to positively identify that threat, see that threat, they duck behind a wall. I think that shooting at that wall where you saw them go behind, given, the circumstances are right, you don't believe there's any other innocents in there, etc., I think that would be an acceptable time to shoot at a target that you can't fully see. So there's just very few instances that type of shooting would be acceptable. For the majority of the time, it's not acceptable, because you just run the risk of hitting innocent people. The key to doing this is knowing beforehand that it is a deadly threat. You're able to positively identify that person breaking down your door, or trying to break down your door and come in, is in fact a bad guy, right? It's not just some overzealous Jehovah's Witness person trying to, get you to come to the door. The person who ducked behind the wall had been shooting at you, and they're a deadly threat. Like before you shot, you was able to positively identify that they're a deadly threat. Before they went behind a wall or behind a door. So that's when it makes it more acceptable. If you never know beforehand if they're a deadly threat and you start shooting at them, that's not acceptable because you have no idea what the hell you're shooting at. That's like out in the woods, some hunter hearing some bushes move and then turn around and start blasting at the bushes. You don't know what the hell's in those bushes. You don't know what's over there. Could be a kid over there playing. So you have to be able to positively identify the threat before shooting at it. Especially in domestic areas like this, inside continental United States. If you don't know what you're shooting at, you just don't know what you're shooting at. You run the risk of hitting people who do not need to be hit. What is behind the target? Now that's obviously something that you need to be more aware of with rifle. You should be aware of it with pistol as well, but something you should be more aware of with rifle because that cartridge, that projectile, is more powerful. It can punch through a lot more. Now, did he see movement on the other side of the fence and then start shooting at that fence, not knowing what is fully behind that fence? And the bullet or bullets went through that fence and hit the officer. Of all the rounds he fired, I don't think all of them hit that officer. So where did those other rounds go? Hopefully they went into the ground or into a tree. But they could have also gone through the wall of a house right next to this house. So under these circumstances, I don't necessarily think that this officer did very good with positively identifying the threat and knowing his target and what was beyond it.
Get the fuck down!
4-7.
Get back! Oh, shoot your hands!
4-7.
That kind of groaning noise that you hear, that's the suspect, I think, who's under that fence making that noise. When people are dying, they can make that kind of type of noise where their breathing starts sounding a little weird. Sometimes it can start sounding like a snoring kind of sound. It's called agonal breathing. They go into that type of breathing, and it doesn't last very long, and then they end up dying. The sounds of people dying is something that I don't necessarily think a lot of people think about what it's going to be like after a shooting. When you think about, self-defense shootings, for the longest time, as far as the visual representations of it, has only been with, theatrical stuff, movies and TV shows. So I think a lot of people, for the most part, have had a unrealistic expectation of, what happens after a person's been shot. It's only from these body cam footages that people can start to hear, so to speak, what it's like after a shooting, or what sounds people could be making. And I think that's an important thing for some people to thinking about, because the sound alone, if you've never heard a person doing the death breath, the taking their last breath, so to speak, it's a distinct sound. Like I said, it can sound kind of like snoring, like they've been just knocked out and they're snoring, but it's not a life sustaining breath or breathing rate. Like, you can tell it's obviously not going to keep them alive very long. Anyway, moving away from that. So we see as soon as we come into vision here over his arm, we can see the sheriff deputy over here, and we see that other officer all the way over here. Now, like I said earlier, was he originally all the way over here? I don't know. I think it's possible that he was closer, he got shot, and he took off to get behind cover, where bullets are hopefully not going to go through and continue to get him. But I just don't know for sure. Unfortunately, we don't get to see body cam footage from the other two.
I'm going to you, Christy.
I think it's stay off of traffic.
I'm going to you, Christy.
It's not, I think it's stay off of traffic.
So he's crossing over this fence that the suspect is under. And I think that he recognizes the guy's under the fence because his rifle's kind of pointed down.
It's my computer. All units not on scene.
Get back! Oh, shoot your hands!
119 my computer. All units not on scene. Stay off of traffic.
I'm going.
Now he sees this deputy's down on the ground. So why does he bypass this deputy and then go all the way over here to this guy who's standing? I don't know. We can't see with clarity of what's going on here. The camera's kind of blurry. So with his eyes, maybe what he could see was it didn't seem like this guy was in that much distress. He didn't appear to be that hurt. Whereas this guy over here is making a lot of noise. He's screaming. He's been shot, etc. And he feels that this guy's more emergent over here.
Where are you, Christy?
46 Virginia.
I got it.
From 2133.
Where you at? Where you at?
My legs!
Okay.
My legs and my right ankle.
1813 for status.
Sir, get back!
Get back! Get in the house!
Sir, get back!
So you can see over here at the corner of the house, someone's coming around.
1813 for status.
Sir, get back!
Get back! Get in the house!
All right. So medical gear. I love the fact they both have tourniquets on them. Sadly, there are some officers out there who do not carry tourniquets. They don't carry any medical stuff on them. There are officers out there who have this mindset of, it's in the car if I need it. And if they don't have anything in the car or on them, they have the mindset of, the ambulance will take care of me. We'll call the ambulance. If you're the type of person to have the mindset that you'll rely on the ambulance, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. If you have the mindset of it's in the car if I need it, you are wrong. How far away are their cars at this point? I don't know. We don't get to see where they start off from. So it's possible that they're 100 yards or more away from their cars. If all their medical gear was in the cars and this guy has been shot and he's bleeding, it's possible that by the time the officer who's helping him goes back to the car, brings the car over there, gets the medical stuff out, and then gets it to him, it's possible that he could bleed to death before that medical gear gets put on him. What if he's by himself and he's been shot? He can barely walk. Do you think that he could cross the distance and make it to his car that's 100 yards away in time before he collapses from blood loss? This is why it's so important to carry medical gear on you, so you can have that rapid application of medical equipment. Now, obviously, you cannot carry a full trauma bag on you at all times. It's just not feasible. But you can carry personal first aid equipment to treat the leading causes of death from battlefield type injuries. So when we look at battlefield type injuries and the tactical combat casualty care that goes along to treat those, massive bleeding is one of the top leading causes of death for those injuries. Which is why that is addressed first when it comes to how you treat people. Follow the acronym of MARCH. M-A-R-C-H. And M stands for massive hemorrhaging. So that's the first thing we deal with. Now, when you look at the battlefield injuries, those data sets, there's more than just small arms, right? There's landmines, improvised explosives, artillery, hand grenades, etc. Do we see those in domestic law enforcement? No, not yet. But small arms is still a part of that data set. Rifles or rifle cartridge or rifle projectile type of weapons. So in warfare, you'll have like belt-fed machine guns like 7.62 by 5.1 and stuff like that. Those type of rounds are traditionally, fired through a belt-fed machine gun, but you also see those rounds can be used in semi-automatic rifles as well. So although we don't have street criminals running around with belt-fed machine guns, they may still get their hands on rifles that fire those very similar cartridges or even exact cartridges. So you can still run into small arms injuries that would be more in line with your intermediate cartridges like your 5.56, 7.62 by 3.9, or you could have people with injuries that would be like they've been hit with something by a belt-fed machine gun, like a heavy machine gun, or potentially even a crew-served kind of type of weapon. And those projectiles into limbs can cause massive bleeding. So when it comes to your personal first aid kit that you're going to carry on you, at the top of the list needs to be stuff to address bleeding. So if there's only going to be one thing, and one thing only, that you carry on you as far as medical goes, I think it needs to be a tourniquet. Now, will a tourniquet address all bleeding issues? No, it's only going to address the arterial bleeding from your limbs. Anything elsewhere, you're going to need different stuff for. So next in line with that, I think some compressed gauze is a good thing to throw in with it, and a pressure bandage as well. So those three bleeding things, I think, should be the top three things that you carry on you. And then you can start adding in stuff like chest seals and airways and stuff like that to your kit. This medical stuff can be carried on you, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. Those tourniquets they had on them, they take up maybe roughly about the size of a handgun magazine pouch in footprint. Like they don't take up that much space. So you can very easily carry a tourniquet on you. When it starts coming to adding more things like a pressure bandage, compressed gauze, chest seals, nasopharyngeal airway, little thing of duct tape, etc., even that stuff doesn't take up a whole lot of room. You can get what's called a medical ankle holster and carry a decent amount of personal first aid stuff in there, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. If you already carry an ankle gun as a backup gun, then on the other ankle, you could very easily put medical gear in a medical ankle holster and have a good set of medical equipment to deal with any injuries that you may have or that one of your coworkers or family members may have. Now, what they have beyond just a tourniquet, I don't know. All we see at this point is tourniquets. Now, with that being said, not every injury to a limb is going to require the application of a tourniquet. Tourniquets are for massive bleeding. When you have a artery that has been severed in that limb, or that limb has been partially or fully amputated, that's massive bleeding. There's been lots of times where I've seen people with injuries that did not appear as though they needed a tourniquet, and tourniquet was put on. That, to me, is a sign of a lack of in-depth medical training. They had enough training to recognize the fact that, they've been shot in the leg. Here we have a tourniquet. We'll put tourniquet on leg. So they had a good awareness level amount of training and a little bit of operations training. But as far as like a higher end technician level of training, they're just not there yet. And so they think that they'll treat all limb injuries with the tourniquet. So with this guy, he has been shot in the leg, but we don't see massive bleeding.
Where you at? Where at?
You can see the two holes right here. Or it could be one hole where a bullet, went. But we don't see a big, thing of wet stuff right here. It's almost like he's not even bleeding. Which can happen with people. They can be shot. You can see bullet holes in people, but they're just not really bleeding from them like you would think. The vessels have constricted from all the stress, being in fight or flight, and they just haven't started bleeding a whole lot yet. as they become more relaxed and those vessels start to become unconstricted, then you can start seeing bleeding. There's been people who have had traumatic amputations before, and the blood just not gushing out right afterwards because all the vessels, fight or flight, have constricted, because your body under fight or flight is more concerned about preserving blood to the core and for the brain, because that's what matters the most in keeping you alive. You don't need your leg or your arm to stay alive. So your body starts to constrict its vessels and reduce the amount of blood flow going out to the extremities. So you can see people with big significant injuries to their extremities and they're not bleeding a whole lot. But once fight or flight starts to diminish, they start to become more relaxed. Those vessels relax and come opened up, and then you start seeing a bunch of blood coming out. So just because we don't see a whole lot of blood right now doesn't mean that there won't be a whole lot of blood later. So until a good assessment can be made on this leg, it could be a good preventative measure to go ahead and just put a tourniquet on.
Step in. Right here. Step in. Step in. Right here.
You can see what looked like a hole right there in his pant leg.
Right here. Step in. Right here. Step in.
And you see blood running down his boot. So this side is bleeding. This side doesn't appear to be bleeding that much. But even then,
where you at?
even then, this does not look like a whole lot of blood to me.
For a 10.
1810 up and shot.
Copy that. 1810. Where's your location?
11, I'm with him. Tourniquets on him.
1811. Are you in the backyard at 2133? Then where's your location?
Up and shot.
Tourniquets need to go high and tight, in my opinion. That tourniquet should have been sent further up the leg until you could not get it to go any further. Run it right up into the crotch area. And then tighten it.
Copy that. 1810. Where's your location?
11, I'm with him. Tourniquets on him.
He also does not even properly apply the tourniquet. All he does is puts it on, pulls the strap to Velcro it in place, and then stops. That tourniquet has a windlass that you have to twist multiple times to get that band to start constricting around the leg to stop that blood flow. So the tourniquet has not even been properly applied at this point. Now, did he start to apply the tourniquet and then come to the mindset of, well, this guy's still standing. He's still alert enough to know what the hell's going on. He's even got his own tourniquet out trying to put it on. Here's this deputy over here in the grass that is not looking so good. Maybe I need to go check on him. Could that have been his mindset? Possibly. But who's to say that once he leaves this officer here to go check on that deputy and start treating him, that this officer doesn't become incapacitated himself and falls down from blood loss and will continue to lose blood because this tourniquet is not properly applied. If you go to put something on someone, you do some type of medical intervention, follow through with it. Don't half-ass it. So you should have put the tourniquet on, moved it a lot higher, and then start twisting that windlass until it would not twist anymore, and then lock it in place. And then do the next leg. Then, if there's no other bullet holes anywhere else in that person, then you can leave them and go on to the next.
1811, are you in the backyard at 2133?
Yes, I know the suspect. He's underneath the fence. You good?
Can somebody verify the location of the officer shot?
What's the address here? Are you hit?
What is the location of the officer?
Watch fire. You hit?
Yeah.
Alright, get down.
Twice. In the leg and chest.
1810, are you?
Wait, no, take it right here!
So his shirt tag right here says paramedic. He also has a tourniquet on his belt.
What is the location of the officer?
Watch fire. You hit?
Yeah.
Alright, get down.
Twice. In the leg and chest.
1810, are you?
Wait, no, take it right here! Don't fucking move!
So he is a paramedic, and he has a tourniquet. He said he's been shot in the leg and the chest. Why has he not applied that tourniquet to his own leg yet? I don't know. It could be that he has looked down at his leg and has noticed that he's not bleeding profusely. He doesn't have arterial bleeding, and that he doesn't need a tourniquet. So I could buy that as a possibility. It could be that he's a little loopy right now from potential blood loss or some airway issues where he's not getting a good enough amount of oxygen going to the brain because he has been shot in the chest. He could be, having some type of pneumothorax or something like that going on. The paramedic tag on him, there are some places here in the U.S. where police are cross-trained in other things. In Michigan, to my knowledge, I think that a lot of police officers up there are cross-trained in other public safety type of disciplines. There's a town up in Michigan. It's got like a weird name to it. It's like Kalamazoo or something like that, where their police are cross-trained as firefighters. So you'll see a police officer driving around in his car, and in the trunk of his car, he has full turnout gear and an air pack to be able to respond to fires. And I believe that some of their officers are cross-trained in EMS. And I think this is what this guy is. I think he's just cross-trained as a paramedic. There's a couple places I can think of in California that are like that. They got officers who are trained paramedics, EMTs, and they go to medical calls because they're obviously always out and are generally first on scene and will be the only ones on scene for a decent amount of time until an ambulance can get there. I think that's a good model to have. I personally believe that all police officers should have an EMT level of medical training, EMT basic. I would even go so far as to say is first responder training. Could be bare minimum, but I think EMT basic is a good one to strive for, because police are out all the time and are able to be on scene faster than a fire truck or an ambulance. And so, aside from being able to treat the general public, give them good pre-hospital care, it also makes sense that they should be able to have that level of training to treat themselves from, obviously, the same reasons for the people. It takes several minutes for an ambulance or fire truck to get there. And for police, for some of the things they'll be getting involved in, like gunfights, that could mean a longer delayed response from the fire or EMS. Sometimes those scenes may not be safe enough for those entities to come onto. The scene may still be hot. It may still be active. And so what has now turned into a 7-minute response time is now going to be maybe 15 to 20 minutes because no one knows where the bad guy's at. It's still a hot scene. So it just makes more sense to me to have police cross-trained in medical as well. One, to be a benefit to the general public, but also to be able to save themselves. A lot of agencies will rely on just CPR, AED, first aid training. Now, having been an instructor for American Heart and Red Cross and doing the CPR, AED, first aid classes, and having been a student of those as well, I personally think that those type of classes should just be CPR and AED only. Trying to throw in the first aid stuff on those classes when you have just so much material already to begin with, it's just not doing anyone any real justice. The first aid stuff in those classes is very heavy PowerPoint and video based, just like the rest of the material is anyway. The hands-on application stuff as far as training goes with those classes, it's very minimal, not a whole lot to go on there. And it's just kind of like an afterthought of, oh, well, we did CPR and AED, and, well, here's a little bit of first aid stuff. Here's how to wrap a bandage around someone's arm. Here's a fake EpiPen. This is how you give somebody an EpiPen. The material itself is good. That's good information to know, but the presentation of it is not the greatest, because like I said, it's thrown in on this class that has been so heavy on CPR and AED that now it's now it's time to do the first aid stuff, and it's kind of a quick wham bam kind of deal, and I just don't think it does any good for anyone to have that kind of quick and dirty presentation on first aid stuff. So personally, I would like to see if people are going to just stick to the basics and not go to an EMT basic level of training, do your CPR first or your CPR AED stuff one weekend. Do your day or 2 day for it, and then pencil out another 2 days just for medical first aid stuff. That way you can get good drills in, good repetitions of treating injuries, how to apply tourniquets, pressure bandages, chest seals, stuff like that. Because in these CPR, AD, first aid classes from Red Cross and American Heart, you don't do that stuff. It's very watered down first aid material. You don't learn how to apply a tourniquet to someone. You don't learn how to put a chest seal on someone. You don't learn how to insert a nasopharyngeal airway. None of that stuff is covered. So you should do your basic CPR AED stuff, and then have a good 2 to 3 solid days of trauma care, first aid, where the students go through multiple scenarios where they actually put a tourniquet on someone, they tighten the thing up, they actually open up a package of chest seals, they take the adhesive backing off of it, and they put it on someone. They learn how to insert a nasopharyngeal airway. They practice it. You can practice it on dummies, and you can also practice it on real live people. Get a mannequin, show how to insert the oral pharyngeal airway, etc. 2 to 3 days of that. And that would be a good first aid level of training. It's going to be 1,000 times better than what you could ever get from American Red Cross or American Heart Association's CPR AD first aid classes.
I tell you, get right here! Don't fucking move! Don't fucking move!
For some reason, he has a renewed focus on this guy. When he came through the fence to begin with, I felt that he knew the guy was there. It's possible that he went over top the fence and never noticed the guy there. But I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what's going on right now. But he seems to have a very renewed focus on this guy.
Don't fucking move!
Now this has got to be probably one of the scariest fucking things to encounter. Someone that you were just talking to, who was just standing on their own 2 feet, is now, bam, down for the count. And in a funny, awkward position, like they just suddenly just collapsed. It wasn't like I feel like I'm going to collapse. I'm going to go over here and kind of slowly let myself down. Like this guy he just fucking fell out. Like to turn around and see that, that's got to be like an oh shit moment. One, I mean, it's already an oh shit moment. Like, oh wow, a teammate, a buddy's been shot. But then turn around and see that they've collapsed when beforehand they were standing and talking, and now they're this. Like that's gotta, man. And he has that appearance of he's dying and or already dead.
Where you at?
So the guy who's been shot in the legs has made his way from this vehicle to over here. This guy, man, he's fucking strong. He's been shot in the legs, presumably with rifle cartridges. You know, he's potentially been shot with 5.56 in the legs, and he made his way all the way over here to be closer to this guy over here.
He's hit hard.
This guy, I think, is probably a detective or probably an admin kind of person. He's not in a full uniform or anything, so I highly doubt he was out working the road like this. So he's either got to be a detective or an admin person.
I got it.
Open it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Those shears that he has.
I got it.
Open
All
it.
right, so he brings them out. These are folded up. So these are tactical shears. These are pretty nice. They fold up to a more compact size, and then you can unfold them, and they become full-sized EMT shears. Pretty cool. If you've got the extra money, that would be a good thing to buy. It doesn't take up a whole lot of room, and one of the downsides to, a regular pair of shears is, I mean, they're fucking scissors, right? Like, you take the footprint, the shape of scissors, it's hard to put that anywhere on you and it not be like a weird, cumbersome kind of setup. Like I've seen people with outer carriers and they'll have a set of shears sitting inside of one of the loops up front, and they just, it looks kind of awkward and it just kind of takes up a bunch of room. This right here, you get to fold it up. It's about the size of a pocket knife, a folded pocket knife. And then, boom, you unfold it, and it's now a full-size pair of shears. So I think these are like somewhere around $50, $75 or something like that. If you've got the extra money, the extra disposable income, this is something I think that would be a really good investment.
Open it.
You got it?
And when it comes to cutting clothing off people, shears are great. The ends of them are rounded, so if you press them up against a person, it's not like you're going to stab them, like if you had a regular pair of scissors. They can cut through a lot of thick material. You can even take EMT shears and cut a penny in half with them. They're pretty strong. And so they're strong to cut through thick material, and they're safe to be cutting the material off of a person versus a pocket knife. I'm not a big fan of just taking a pocket knife and trying to cut people's clothes off. You run the risk of causing more injury to that person by accidentally stabbing them or slashing across them. So shears, I think, are the number one best thing to be using to cut off people. There are recessed blade cutters, like a seatbelt cutter, that I think are the next best thing to be able to be trying to cut clothes off people, because it has that recessed blade. It reduces the chances of you cutting a person, and it still does a good job of cutting the clothing off.
Oh, shit.
You with me, buddy? You with me? Just keep breathing. Just keep fucking breathing. You with me, buddy? You with me? Just keep breathing. Just keep.
So the other guy who's over there with the suspect, he's asking for cuffs. And so that's something else that makes me think he's probably more of an admin person or a detective. He's just not wearing any gear. All he's got is a gun, maybe a reload. If you're an officer, you should always have cuffs on you. Like, why is this on-duty officer not having a pair of handcuffs on him? As a police officer, part of your job description is fucking arresting people. Generally, you need handcuffs for that. Some people will go willingly without cuffs, Some people won't. They'll try to fight you. So why he's going around without a pair of handcuffs, I don't know. But I think that's totally fucking stupid. I think is about as dumb as officers who don't carry gloves. You'd be amazed about how many videos out there where these officers are like, "Has anybody got an extra pair of gloves?" Like, what the hell are you doing not carrying gloves on you? Like, where the hell have you been at your whole career? So he's talking on the radio, I guess, and he's saying the paramedic's been hit. So this kind of reminds me of like that scene off that movie Saving Private Ryan where the medic gets shot. And of all the people who know what to do, it's that guy who's been shot. Like, this is worst case scenario. The damn medic's been hit. And in that movie, Saving Private Ryan, one of them characters, I think it's the guy who just recently died, Tom Sizemore, I think it was, played in the movie Heat. I thought I remember him in that scene, saying or asking the guy, tell us what we need to do. How do we fix you? And that goes back into what I talked about earlier, why I think police should have a higher level of medical training beyond just this stupid-ass first aid stuff that comes along with the CPR AED stuff. Because when it comes to treating traumatic injuries and increasing a person's odds of survival, that shit is counted in seconds, not minutes. Time is of essence with traumatic injuries like this. You can bleed to death in 90 seconds from a femoral artery bleed. 90 seconds. Average response time for an ambulance is around 5 to 9 minutes. You can be dead 4 or 5 times over before an ambulance ever gets to you. And then once they get to you, there's nothing they can do once you're gone. You're fucked. The ambulance could bring the entire trauma center with them. Like, they wouldn't even have to pick you up and take you to the damn hospital. They could bring the fucking trauma center to you. And there's still nothing that could be done for you. So that is why medical training is so important, because it takes so damn long for an ambulance to, one, get to you, and then two, get you to where you need to go. So in pre-hospital care, there's a couple of terms that are used to talk about the time frame in providing care. So there's the Platinum 10 and the Golden Hour. Platinum 10 and Golden Hour. So the Platinum 10 is you being able to provide pre-hospital care to a person within 10 minutes of them incurring a traumatic injury. And if a person can get good level of pre-hospital trauma care to them within 10 minutes of a traumatic injury, it can increase their chances of survival by X amount %. The Golden Hour is you being able to get to a person, provide care to them, and get them to the hospital within an hour. The Golden Hour. If you can do that, you can increase a person's chances of survival by X amount %. Now, what those numbers are, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a significant number. The first 10 minutes, if you can get care to someone, it increases those chances of survival by a lot.
Oh shit.
You with me, buddy? You with me? Just keep breathing. Just keep fucking breathing. Get him in my fucking car. Let's go.
So we can see some more stuff laying on the ground here. And his face, man, like, Like, he's not looking good. We see the trauma bag back here.
Just keep fucking breathing. Get him in my...
This looks like maybe the backing to a chest seal. We can't see his body or anything very well.
Just keep breathing. Just keep fucking breathing. Get him in my fucking car. Let's go. Can I sit up?
So I'm assuming they put a chest seal on him.
Let's go. Roll it.
Now they are taking him somewhere.
Yep, right there.
Where they're taking him at, I don't know.
Get him.
I don't think an ambulance has arrived on scene yet.
Get him. Get him. Yep, right there.
So what I think is going on is they're going to take him to one of these police cars and they're going to go to the hospital themselves. Yeah, that can be a faster way to get someone to the hospital. Especially if the ambulance has not arrived yet. Now, I've seen this in multiple other videos before. Injured officer is picked up, thrown in the back of a car, and boom, they take off. And it's interesting to me in a lot of those videos when it's done that way, how it's done. Like, they will literally throw them in the back of the car by themselves, and then someone takes off. That shit right there is what used to be done before ambulances were invented. So way back in the day, before ambulances were a thing, the funeral home would come out to pick people up from the scene of a car accident. And, you know, they bring the hearse out or whatever. And, you know, the hearse, big, long, you know, car that's made to fit a person laying down. They would come, pick these people up, throw them in the back, and they just take off towards the hospital. And the person in the back just sat there or laid there. If they made it to the hospital in time and the nurses and doctors came out and pulled the person out, took them in, worked on them, then great. I guess if the hearse got there and they opened up the back and the dude was dead, then I guess, you know, the hearse driver just closed the door and then continued on to the funeral home. I don't know. But I do know that that's how it started with pre-hospital care. It started with just throwing someone in the back of a car and driving like crazy to the hospital. That level of medical, quote-unquote, technology is old. And it's not doing anything for the person in the meantime. From point A to point B, they're not receiving any treatment. They're getting to a place that can provide them treatment, but it's that lag time in between that is of importance, which is why things changed and evolved to what they are today. So eventually, along with this hearse that went out, people started getting some training. And they would go and ride in the back with this person and help them out on the way. Bandage up wounds and stuff like that. And then it got a little bit more advanced. And then in the 1970s, EMS, the way we know it and see it today, became more formal. It became more nationalized. More national standards put into place. And now, today, we have very highly trained paramedics that are damn good at what they do, super knowledgeable. They're just a stone's throw away from, being able to be a doctor. And some of them are. Some of them are, they've been in it for a while. They're very, very knowledgeable and very great at what they do. And so when you look at, the way we do stuff today, the survival rate is very high. And in fact, the reason why our murder rates in large metropolitan areas are not as high as they are is because of modern medical technology. The only reason why so many of these gangbanging thugs out there have aggravated assault charges instead of murder charges is because a paramedic was damn good at their craft. A doctor was damn good at their craft. But before they ever got to that damn doctor, they were seen by an EMT or a paramedic, for the most part. And were given treatment while en route to the hospital. So if you go back to the 1930s, where a hearse just pulls up and the person gets thrown in the back, and then they drive like hell to the hospital, the survival rate is not that great. And so if we had 1930s level medical technology today, our murder rate would be through the fucking roof. Like, you think it's high right now. You get like Chicago. You see all these murders in Chicago going on. If you think the murder rate's high, just imagine what it would be like if we had 1930s level medical technology or services. I think if it was like that, we would probably see the UN start getting involved with places like Chicago and Atlanta and New York and LA. Because it would be damn near like fucking genocide in places like that. Because today, the murder rate, although it's high, it's just not that high. The aggravated assaults, the attempted murders, those are high. Those are through the roof. The instances of people trying to kill another are very high. Their success is low because of modern medicine. So when they go to take this officer and throw them in the back of the car to take off, they are in essence offering to them 1930s level medical treatment. Someone needs to be in the back providing care to them. Maintaining that airway, making sure that they're breathing. If they stop fucking breathing, being able to do something about it. Looking for additional injuries and more holes in them, plugging those holes. If that's not going on, then you are essentially doing what we did back in the 1930s. Throwing someone in the back of the car and just taking off. The success rate with that may not be very good.
Get him! Get him! Get him!
You're going to be taking Saginaw North or 475 North.
So we can see that 2 tourniquets have now been applied to this guy. And we can see that these are a little bit higher. So the first tourniquet was put on. Maybe someone else came along and said, hey, that's not high enough. I'll put another one on. And they just put it on above that one. You should never undo a tourniquet just to move it higher or try to make it, better if you still see bleeding going on. Don't undo what's already there and then try to retighten it. Just put another tourniquet on. So whatever was going on, whether he was still bleeding a lot from this leg or they just recognized that, hey, we need to put a tourniquet higher, whoever put the second one on did it right. They did a good job by putting it higher where it needs to go and leaving that other one in place.
C unit.
Now, we're lucky that he was only shot in the lower extremities with rifle. This vest that he's wearing is not rated to stop rifle, so it's good that he was not shot in the chest with rifle, or else he would not be able to prop himself up the way he is right now. That in itself is something else that I've talked about in other videos before. How I believe that body armor, the way that it is now, is going to change in the next decade or so. Surprised it hasn't made a full change by now, but I would say for sure in the next decade we're going to see a change in armor for law enforcement. Which the fact that we're seeing outer vests, that in of itself is already a huge change compared to how it's always been for the longest time. Longest time was always concealable vest under the shirt. Now we got outer vests. The next big change, I think, is vests that are capable of stopping rifle threats. So this vest right here is a soft vest. The panels in it are most likely level 3A, which only stop pistol. Which pistol caliber cartridges are the most common threat faced by officers on the street. But with the emerging trend of these little street thugs getting their hands on AR-15 and AK pistols and or just carbines and rifles, the threat now is rifle cartridge. I think that overall, pistol cartridge is still the leading threat. It's the highest threat level that officers face. But we're seeing more AR-15s and more AKs on the streets. And rifle cartridges will punch straight through soft armor with no problem. In fact, if this guy had been shot with a rifle wearing this vest, I would not be surprised, depending on, the type of round and the caliber, for a round to go through the front of the vest, through his torso, and out the back panel. Unfortunately, right now, the way to stop rifles is mostly by what's called plates. So it first started out with steel plates, and steel plates are heavy. And then it evolved into ceramic plates. Ceramic plates are lighter than steel, but they're still heavy. And now you have poly plates, which are very light, but they're super expensive. They're great at stopping rifle cartridges, but they are basically just a big square-shaped kind of plate that go to the front and then to the back. Imagine like a big textbook from school, like a big science book or something like that, or a big social studies book. Imagine taking a big textbook like that and putting it to your front and then to your back. You don't get the full wraparound effect with it like you do soft armor that covers a whole lot more area. And those plates are thick. And when you wear a thick plate to the front and a thick plate to the back, it's not very comfortable to be sitting in a car in all the time. It's just kind of cumbersome and uncomfortable, I guess you could say. There are some agencies out there that rock plate carriers as a uniform. But there's one company out there that produces a vest that wears something like this. It's flexible panels that are like, your pistol panels, but they're rated to stop rifle. And it's called the FRAS, Flexible Rifle Armor System, by a company called Safe Life Defense. Before this company, several years back, there was another armor system called Dragon Skin, and it's kind of the same kind of concept, I guess. You just have multiple ceramic tiles inside this vest, and they're rated to stop rifle. But the FRAS vest, it wears, and you can get it put it in an outer carrier, or you can put it in a concealable carrier, but it wears just like a normal 3A vest. It's got the panels, it's flexible, but it can stop rifle. So you have better coverage over the body, and you can get it into a carrier that can be a Class A style of outer carrier, where it looks more like a uniform, or you can have it under the shirt where it's concealed. Unfortunately, that's, to my knowledge, right now, that's the only company that is producing something like that. Safariland and Point Blank and Paca, to my knowledge, they don't have anything like that right now. And so my prediction is that in the next decade, that's going to change, and those big armor manufacturers are going to start producing products like that. And we will see agencies start purchasing those vests, because they're really all-around kind of vest. Like, they stop pistol and rifle. Get both of the great worlds in that, in a package that is just like a 3A vest that they've been using for decades now. So I can see in the next decade that kind of paradigm shift occurring. And on top of that, because we are seeing AR-15s and AKs, whether they're pistols, carbines, or rifles, becoming more popular, more trending with the street crowd, I unfortunately see some possible legislation coming down to ban those things or further restrict those things. It's unfortunate to think about our Second Amendment rights being done like that, but with the way our society is going, and because these things are emerging, and officers are, at risk of being seriously injured and or killed by them, I see that as a possibility. I see the possibility of AR-15s being banned, because that's like the big, buzz thing with the anti-gun crowd anyway. They're all like, well, we don't need weapons of war on the streets. Why does anybody need AR-15? So they're already fucking hating AR-15s. They already want them gone. And as time goes on, more of these things are being used in crimes, more officers potentially injured and killed by them, just increases the chances and likelihood of the anti-gun crowd succeeding and actually banning the damn things. So those are my two predictions. I hope that it's just the armor prediction that comes true. But who knows? We might have to see the unfortunate event where our Second Amendment rights are trampled even further.
Christy, I'm back.
You're good, my man. You're good.
What do you need, Corey? I got gauze.
Copy that. Backing on a half hill.
I got guys, and just throws it on his lap. Like, what? What are you doing? What good is that doing?
Got this whole boot.
Copy that. Semi-responsive.
Yeah.
You alright, bro?
Where's the second rig going?
All right, so just a random thought here. This tie. This is one thing that I've never fully understood about some agencies and their choice in a police uniform. You're going to have a person in, a shirt with a tie and uniform pants. What purpose is this tie serving other than just getting in the way? It serves no purpose whatsoever. This part of a uniform should be reserved for just ceremonial purposes only. Like this, you should never see this out on the streets. It's fucking stupid.
So
I think we can go ahead and take us this turn.
If there's not a game, I do that.
And then, here's another thing that I noticed.
So I think we can go ahead
And I see this quite a bit.
and take us this turn.
This guy shows up with the vest that's not even on all the way. He don't even have the side tightened up here.
If there's not a game,
So I think we can go ahead and take us this turn.
Another office person who doesn't go out and hit the streets a whole lot. Doesn't even have his vest on correctly.
if there's not a game, I do that. Connell Street, set him up to Connell. A game, I do that. Connell Street, set him up to Connell.
So we see the suspects laying over here. No one's doing anything for him. It could be that they've evaluated him and the injuries that they can see are non-survivable. He could have brain matter coming out of his head, and they're like, "Yep, this guy's not going to make it. Nothing we can do for him." I personally, or he stopped breathing completely. Like he stopped breathing, showing no signs of life. I personally have no problem with that. I believe that if a person's been shot and they are no longer breathing, you should be able to have the choice of not providing any further medical care to them. Because the chances of their survival anyway are extremely, extremely low. It's like 1 or 2% survival rate if you do CPR on this person. Which is why there's a lot of EMS agencies out there that when they get to the scene of an accident, like a car wreck, and there's a person who's not breathing, they don't have a pulse, they simply just will not do anything to them. They won't start CPR, they won't put an AED on them or anything. They just fucking pronounce them there. Now, other places, they may go ahead and start doing that. They'll work them, throw them in the back of an ambulance, take them to the hospital, and then let the doctor do the pronouncing there. But a lot of places, they get there, it's the mechanism of injury, it's traumatic, they're not breathing, there's no pulse, chances of survival are so low, don't even bother working on them. Like I said, I can agree with that. I think that's acceptable. However, if you go back to what their level of training is, then there's a good possibility that their level of medical training is American Heart or American Red Cross, and there is no options in that level of training to not provide care to someone because they had a traumatic injury. The only times under those curriculums that they say it's okay not to provide aid is in cases of obvious death. Like there is brain matter, like a substantial amount of brain matter out of that person's head. They're decapitated. They're cut in half. Signs of decomp going on, rigor mortis, liver mortis, obvious signs of death. Or the scene is unsafe, or you're too fatigued to continue. Those are the only times under those entities' curriculum that you can opt not to provide care. So unless they can see, significant brain matter come out of this guy's head, then under the curriculum of what they were trained on, or presumably trained on, they should be providing care to this guy. Otherwise, they could be, quote unquote, sued for it. And the other thing, too, is it could be a little bit different up there because some of their officers are cross-trained. But for a lot of places, the police, their level of medical training doesn't fall under a medical director, a doctor. So like you go anywhere in the U.S. where an ambulance provider is providing services, those EMTs and paramedics, there is a medical director above them that sets out these guidelines and who they're operating under technically. The police may not even have to be under that medical director. And so they may not fall under that protection if that medical director says it's okay not to provide care if there's signs of obvious trauma or the person has died from that trauma of the car wreck or the gunshots. So they wouldn't be covered like the EMTs would be. But since that one deputy was a paramedic, and I do know that there is some cross-training up there in Michigan, I don't know how that fully works up there. They might, for those officers who are cross-trained, they might fall under the direction of that medical director. But I don't know that for sure.
I think one of my bullets hit Christie. I think my bullet hit Christie. You fired at him? That guy in there's moving on the other side of the fence. He's right there. He backs up. Don't stop talking.
All right, stop talking. So he is telling this officer to stop talking because he is reminding this officer of his rights. This officer is an American citizen. He's in America. He has a Fifth Amendment right not to self-incriminate. All right? Just like everyone else. So he's telling him to stop talking. He's reminding him of his right to remain silent. And you should remain silent after a shooting because you are under the influence of a drug called adrenaline. Fight or flight has occurred. Your body has had an adrenaline dump, along with some other stuff. But the adrenaline can make you very jittery and make you talk excitedly. You may not want to make statements while under the effects of adrenaline because you could say something in a way that you normally would not say it, and it could be used against you even when what you said was not totally that bad. But an attorney can take words and twist them in cross-examination and make you look like you're a caveman or just a murderous, uncaring individual. And you also just don't want to excitedly make comments that could be used against you if this turns into a criminal case or a civil case. So this guy is doing the right thing by telling this officer to remain silent, stop talking. What they should do past this point is separate him from other people so that he's not going to be talking and blabbing, and assign someone to him to watch him and make sure that he's okay, that he doesn't start having medical issues, and take him to the hospital to have him checked out. And then he can be with counsel after that, and or a representative. If they have a union up there, the union rep could be with them, or if they have like an FOP representative, a FOP representative could come there and, remind them of what his peace officer rights are within that state, what resources are available to them, etc. And should not make any statements to any investigators until at least 24 hours after the incident. Now, that doesn't mean, he can't point out, well, if you stand right there in that part of the yard and look over there, you should see rifle casings there. If you look over here, you should see a magazine there. It doesn't mean you can't help point out evidence, right? Or answer some basic things that would just help get an idea of, some basic things that need to be known. You can still do that, but making full-on blown statements about what's going on immediately after a shooting, you should not be doing that, because you're under the effects of adrenaline, and during that fight or flight incident where you had to fight for your life, you may not be able to very accurately recall the exact sequence of events immediately after the incident, or there may be some parts of that incident that are just not coming to your mind right then and there, and they may come back to your mind a few hours later or a day later.
What say we got? Walk into a car. I don't know yet. Is it medic?
Yeah, good. Just shook him up, obviously. Blur.
We're 50 seconds through it.
Yeah.
You know who hit him?
I don't think I hit the suspect. I think one of my bullets hit Christy.
I think one of my bullets hit Christy. That sounds bad. Sounds like he's fucking laughing about it. Now, this goes to a civil case. An attorney is going to rip this dude apart. Oh, Officer such and such, you think this is funny? Why was you laughing? Why did you chuckle? And when a jury sees this, they're going to think, wow, this guy's, he's fucking demented. He's sadistic. He's laughing about him shooting a fellow officer. And they will never understand the concept of how people react to stressful situations. Some of the responses they can have, gallows humor, things like that. I don't think that this officer is demented. I don't think that he's sadistic. I don't think that he thinks it's funny that he shot an officer. He was just involved in a gunfight where he had a legitimate fear of dying. And he's still, I think, under the effects of fight or flight. He still has adrenaline pumping through his body. So this is a great illustration of why you just should not make any fucking statements after a shooting. Because this little, I think one of my rounds hit Christy, that could be very damaging for him in a court.
Because I saw the mag and he shot, and he backs up and he points, and then I just saw a blur behind the fence, which I thought was the suspect, and I fired around that fence, and I think one of mine hit Christy in the leg.
I got northbound 475 shut down.
One of mine hit Christy in the leg.
Alright, not much else to talk about with this video. If you like what you hear and see, go ahead and give me a like and a share. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more Monday quarterback videos. Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense, thank you for watching.